Hi guys! Welcome to Blue Fox Fable's very first video review. I decided to try something a little bit different and change things up from my usual text blog. So let's give this a go and see how it works out. Oh, but BT dubs guys, there's going to be some knocking in this video. I really hate it, but for some reason my apartment complex said, it's Sunday, everybody wants to hear us renovating, so let's do that then. Today I'm going to be talking about The Best of All Possible Worlds by Karen Lord. This book was sent to me courtesy of the publisher Del Rey. Thank you very much, Del Rey. I really love Karen Lord. I love her books, so let's talk about this one and see if you guys love it too. Incidentally, here's a photo of the author. She's awesome! So this was actually the very first book that I read this year, way back in January. Oh my god, what happened to February through July? And it's definitely remained one of my top 5 for 2013 so far. So I'm not expecting that to change, and that just tells you how awesome it is. So let's have a brief summary. This story takes place on Cygnus Beta, which is a world colonized by a bunch of different races, all of which originate from the original Earth-based humans. So the Sidiri are one of the various races with human origins, and they have taken refuge on Cygnus Beta because their homeworld was polluted by a biochemical agent. An unfortunate result of this disaster is that most of their females have been killed. That leaves a lot of males and almost no females at all, so procreation is gonna be a problem. And because of this, a small envoy of Sidiri have decided to go in search of genetic and cultural matches that will hopefully be willing to marry into the Sidiri homestead. So that's the majority of the story. It involves going with the envoy and meeting all these different cultures, and it's really cool because they're all very different and very much their own thing within a larger world. So it's definitely fascinating watching them try to figure out whether or not these people are going to be a match for, their culture, their genetics. Do they look like they want them to look, or do they want to go a completely different route? It's really just interesting. But within that story is a more personal story. The two main characters, one of which is a Sidiri and one of which is from Cygnus Beta, they have, let's face it, a romance. But it's not a sappy, overdone romance like you might think of, like, oh, a romance novel. It's not like that. It's a slow building romance based on having to learn how to understand one another and having a growing affection for one another based on the time that they've spent together, and learning to overcome the obstacles that are just part of being two completely different types of cultures. One that's very reserved and cool and thoughtful, and one that's very brash and just out there. So let's talk about those two main characters. They are Delarua and Delnak. And I frankly don't know how to say Delnak's name, so we're just gonna have to suffer through my very poor pronunciation. He has a lot of consonants in his name, and I dare you to try and do it right. I really like the both of them. Delarua is a great female lead. She's impulsive, strong-willed, independent, feisty, definitely stubborn. But she also has vulnerabilities. And you learn more about that as you meet her family, and you learn about some dodgy things that have happened to her in the past. And she's still getting over the insecurities that were caused by that situation, so that comes into play a lot in her dealings with Delnak and the other Sidiri. By contrast, Delnak is cerebral and reserved, and definitely a traditional Sidiri with the intention of finding a more traditional mate. He's trying to lead his people by example, so he's trying to behave the way he thinks that his people should behave at their new home. He's trying to do the things that he thinks they need to do to stay alive. And unlike Delarua, he has a tendency not to be very straightforward and talk circles around his actual meaning, which annoys her more often than not, but she gradually learns how to deal with that. There are several other characters in the story. I'm not going to talk about them just because, don't want to take forever, and they're not as central to the story, but they are very individually portrayed, and they do have purposes within the story as confidants and as contrast and comparison relationships to Delarua and Delnak, and also as catalysts for some of their actions. So they definitely have a purpose, but I'm not going to go into them today. So while this book is science fiction, it's obviously not hard science fiction. It's about cultures and relationships and learning to adapt in a new situation where everyone around you is different than you, where you have a lot of groups that you have to learn to interact with, and where the person that you deal with the most is just your opposite. So no, you're not going to find out what happened exactly to cause the Sideri's homeworld to be destroyed. You're not going to learn the political situation or much about the race that did it. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is the cultural aspect, the social aspect, and the romantic aspect. And all of these elements are combined and related and go together in the story, and that's what makes me really, really love it. So in general, I think Karen Lord is amazing, and I will pretty much read everything she writes ever. In fact, I can even recommend her previous book, The Redemption in Indigo, which is completely unlike this book. It's not science fiction. It's more like magical realism or a retold legend or fairy tale, that sort of thing. If I had to compare it to anything, I'd say it had sort of an Anansi Boys flair, but that might not be an apt comparison, so take it as you will. So that's The Best of All Possible Worlds by Karen Lord. I give this book a 4.5 out of 5, and let me know in the comments whether or not you've read this book, what you thought about it, or if it's on your to-read list. Or for that matter, let me know what's on your to-read list in general, because I'm always looking for something new to try. So thanks guys, bye bye!